Welcome to our fifth Tri Talk. I'm Kathleen Walker with New England Endurance Events, and we have Emma Taylor here tonight. This is the last of our Tri Talks. We've had quite a few. If you've missed any of our other Tri Talks, you can go to the New England Endurance Events YouTube page. If you just type in New England Endurance Events, we'll pop up there, and you'll see all the other talks. But you're going to love this one most of all. Um, let me do a quick intro of Emma, and then we'll give her a chance to get started and talk to you guys all about the do's and don'ts of training. So Emma Taylor is with SISU Boston Physical Therapy and Performance, and that's located in Brookline. She's residency trained sports certified specialist. She's a USAT level 2 coach. She's certified strength and conditioning specialist, and she's the head coach for MIT and the BU Club triathlon teams. Lots and lots of good experience, and you guys get to benefit from that today. So without further ado, Emma, if you'd like to get started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kathleen, and thank you to New England Endurance Events for having me and to you all for carving out some time on your Thursday evening to join us tonight. So let me share my screen here and then we'll get started. Right. Perfect. Hopefully everyone can see that all right. So this is triathlon training, do's and don'ts. As Kathleen mentioned, I am a full-time physical therapist. There are, I think, less than 1% of residency trained sports certified specialists in the entire country. I'm lucky enough to be one of those. And so I work with a lot of endurance athletes. I work with active adults in my practice at CSU Boston and Brookline. I'm also a USAT level 2 certified coach, a certified strength and conditioning specialist. And then I do get to hang out with college kids at 7 a.m. when they're nice and tired some days of the week with MIT and BU Club Triathlon as I coach for them. So, our goals for today. I would really love for everyone to know what actually matters in triathlon training. There's, three separate sports. There's transitions, there's nutrition, really filtering out kind of what is worth your time, and what is not. I would love for everyone to know what the most common beginner mistakes are, just so you can avoid them, and knowing that, sometimes those things that can cause injuries or slow people down, they don't need to make race day, harder than it needs to be. And then have a simple, actionable training framework. So have a clear, very simple structure for just how to go about your training every week, without needing necessarily a coach to guide you, just so you're not guessing or even just doing random workouts. And lastly, know exactly what to implement for this coming week. So you'll leave with 3 to 5 takeaways that you can start doing immediately to train smarter. So we're going to go through each of the disciplines sort of one by one, really break them down. If you have any questions, I will address all of those at the end, so you can write those down in the chat. Perfect. So we're going to start with some technique. So many triathletes come into the sport potentially not having a swim background. Even if you have had a swim background, it's good to remember these sort of key do's and don'ts. We're going to go through the do's first. So first, thinking about focusing on long and smooth strokes. So we want to think about efficiency and that your distance per stroke should be greater than your number of strokes. We want to think about rotations. You want to make sure that you're not flat when you're swimming. So flat meaning that your body is not rotating from the top and then also at your hips too. When you rotate well, you're going to be able to move more powerfully through the water with less effort. We want to think about keeping a straight body line. So when we are swimming in our straight body line, it's going to reduce the basically the resistance that the water is pushing against us. If our hips are falling down or our head is too low or our head is too high, all of those things are going to make that sort of like a seesaw motion, and that's what's going to cause more resistance to your swimming and less efficient swimming as well. Um, we want to enter the water with a clean hand and forward reach. So a lot of beginners that I see will try to enter the water and they might think that they're entering sort of with their fingertips first, but it might actually be their elbow. And so that's something where, if you have someone, a friend, film you while you're swimming, that's really kind of an easy one to pick out. You can see like, are my fingers sort of entering the water first and then the rest of my arm following? Or is it actually that my elbow is hitting the water first? We want to breathe with rhythm. Also, sort of another beginner mistake that I see where people will lift their head and then turn to the side instead of kind of keeping just a straight kind of head position and then just kind of turning in time with their stroke. Um, I do recommend using flip turns. That's obviously a little bit more of an advanced swim skill. It is something that you can learn. It just takes practice, like anything else. And even more than saving time, I think that they help you build awareness in terms of your breathing patterns. So you're going to become a more confident swimmer because you're going to be exhaling through that entire flip turn so you don't get water up your nose. And then you're going to be able to push off the wall and kind of still be holding your breath and then take a breath, when you're ready to off the wall. And that will also help with more making swimming in the pool feel more continuous, much similarly to outdoor swimming. Obviously, if you have, any vestibular issues that prevent you from doing that, please do not use your common sense there. But flip turns can be very helpful too, just even in terms of knowing what a streamlined position is off of the wall. So pushing off the wall with our body in a really taut position. And flip turns help teach us that too. Um, every swim that you have, that you do, should have a purpose. So you should always have a plan. It should never be, oh, I'm just going to go swim 2,000 yards straight today and see how it goes because, that's the distance that I'm going to need to swim in a race. You always want to have a plan. You typically might want to start out with like a warm up, go through some different drills, and then you would build into a main set and a cool down. And that's going to help you become more efficient in the water by doing those drills first, then going into a main set where you might try to keep those drills and turn them into more of your regular stroke. And you also might do main sets that focus more on fitness too. But either way, just like you would, have a bike set that you're doing and not necessarily go out on a bike ride, you really want to have a structured swim. That's going to be the biggest thing that will help you get faster in the water. Uh, Another big thing, sort of more on the beginner side of things, is that oftentimes it's tempting to sort of be very like tense in the water. And we really want to stay relaxed. So some of the best swimmers out there, if you watch videos of them, it just sort of looks like they're like gliding in the water. And it's sort of about knowing where to keep tension in your trunk and in your body, but also where to stay relaxed. And that's where learning how to breathe properly in the water can be really helpful. So always making sure that you're exhaling either through your mouth or through your nose when your face is in the water, and then just taking a quick inhale outside of that. If you hold your breath when your face is submerged in the water, that's going to cause a buildup of carbon dioxide. It's going to make you feel like you're a little bit more panicked. And so always making sure that your breathing is staying relaxed can be a really easy way of, again, improving your efficiency in the water. Onto our don'ts. Don't swim like a dog paddle. That comes back to sort of that entry. So sometimes you'll see that people don't even clear sort of their arm outside of the water. There is dog paddle drills or kind of different technique things that we work on that involve that. However, we just don't want that to be a part of our regular swim stroke. Over kicking as well. So that's sometimes a compensation that we'll see when you don't have good body tautness or body position. You're going to want to kick to try to keep your hips up and propel yourself forward. The kick should really be, especially for triathlon, a little bit more of just kind of for balance in the water rather than propulsion in and of itself, unless you're sort of starting or ending the swim, I should caveat. But generally, many times, in triathlon races, it's a wetsuit legal swim, so that will help your body position. So you should hopefully feel like you don't have to kick as much. But especially when you're racing in general, the kick is going to be, if you're over kicking, it's going to really burn out your legs for the bike and the run. So that's something to really think about when we're swimming. Obviously, we can do kick sets and things that work on our efficiency of kick and sort of fatigue resistance to that. But in general, it's really good to make sure that you're not over kicking and just kind of panic kicking when you're swimming. Clenching your fists, we don't want to do that either. So you want to have kind of a nice, relaxed hand. The fingers shouldn't be super taut, kind of squeezing together, but almost like a little bit spread apart. You'll actually catch more water that way. And so you just don't really ever want to be swimming with like a fist or kind of clenched fingers like that. We talked about the body rotation already, so that also, with my physical therapy background, oftentimes that can be if people are swimming too flat, it puts a lot of strain on the rotator cuff and the shoulders. And so, from an injury prevention perspective, making sure that you're rotating correctly in the water can be a really good way to take some of the load off of your shoulders and make sure that you're engaging your big lat muscle instead to propel you forward. Um, with rely we do not want to rely solely on your watch or your gadgets. I say solely because a watch can be helpful for some people, especially if you don't have a clock where you swim. Some people have been using like form goggles or just goggles that give you some information and some coaching within them. That's all fine, but I would really encourage that, come race day, you likely won't have some of these things. You hopefully are not going to be looking at your watch while you're swimming on race day. And so you really want to gain a feel for the water and what it feels like without having all these other things or headphones even as well. There's nothing scarier than going from, always hearing music while you're swimming to then going into open water and having it be dark and silent. So really making sure that you're practicing those conditions for, come race day as well. I do think it's also a very useful skill to be able to look at a clock and, say like, okay, we're going to do 100-yard repeats on the 2-minute mark, let's say. And so you know that you're not relying on your watch. If it messes up the timing or anything, you can look at that clock at the pool and say, okay, every 2 minutes is when I go again for my 100. And that's just a very sort of useful skill to have, especially if you're thinking about ever joining a swimming group or a master's group. Oftentimes they will swim based on a clock and not on the watch that you're wearing. We talked about this as well, just not neglecting stroke mechanics. So really incorporating drills into your swims, really important. So that's going to be something where, you can YouTube a bunch of different swim drills. I'm sure some of the previous coaches might have even mentioned some of them in these talks. You can go back and take a look at those, but really making sure that the drills that you're doing are not reinforcing bad habits, but reinforcing good ones. We talked about the flip turns already too. And then not sprinting every lap. So just like how you don't want to go out and just swim 2,000 yards continuously, you also don't want to go as hard as you can for every single lap, mainly because, that's probably going to be less efficient. You're probably going to lose form along the way. And then from, an injury risk perspective, recovery perspective, that's just kind of a bit unrealistic there. So I mentioned a little bit of some breathing things already, but we'll start with the do's here. So do practice bilateral breathing every session. So especially for open water swimming, being able to look when you breathe on side to side and know what is around you is a very important skill. It will also help you build balance in your stroke. Most people have one side that they prefer breathing to as they swim. However, that's fine if that's your preferred side, but it's just really helpful to be able to look the other way too without having to stop and do breaststroke. So practicing that in the pool will help reinforce good habits so that when you go into open water, you're able to sort of look both ways without having to interrupt your stroke. As I said earlier, making sure you're exhaling continuously underwater. I noticed that particularly when people swim in open water, this is something that they lose. So this can be just a good cue to remind yourself is, when you're swimming in open water in a race, just making sure that you're really exhaling continuously. Um, Rhythmic breathing drills, so making sure that the timing of your breath is sort of when it needs to be. And that's something that, it takes practice. And so you might want to actually practice specific drills that have you breathe either really quickly or ones where you're using a snorkel and not, breathing at all, just to kind of see how the breathing is affecting your stroke and how that turn of the head is it really significantly slowing you down as you go, then that's something that you might want to focus on a little more. More related to open water swimming, but making sure that you're sighting. So kind of, your head is normally down when you're swimming and you're just slowly lifting or quickly lifting your eyes just so your eyes are just looking straight ahead above the water, and then putting your head back down again or taking a breath. It's good to practice that in the pool if you can't get to open water, especially for some of these earlier season races and it's, been colder and maybe you're not ready to get in the open water yet. Practicing sighting in the pool can be really helpful just so that when you go into open water, you're like, oh, my neck muscles are used to lifting like that. I'm not, lifting my head so high that my hips and my legs are completely sinking down and then I completely lose all momentum. Staying relaxed even when the water is choppy, that's definitely takes a little bit of practice. It's something where, again, the more that you practice swimming in open water, when the conditions aren't the best, the easier it's going to be when it comes race day and there's a lot of, chaos going on around you with people around you, and then maybe there's water conditions too. But that's where I would encourage you to go back to, am I exhaling continuously under the water? Am I over kicking? Kind of what are the basic principles of my stroke that I know that when my form sort of gets bad that I go to, can I sort of undo those? What are the things that, you really need to be thinking about? So on to the don'ts. Don't panic when swallowing water. It happens to everyone. Everyone's gotten, a gulp full of chlorine or salt water, or whatever it is. If you need to kind of reset, whether that's in the pool or in open water, take a few different, strokes, backstroke, breaststroke, just to make sure that, you're kind of resetting. That's completely fine. Not holding your breath for too long. Again, that's going to be where we want to exhale under the water. And then I'll just kind of go through some of these because they're basically the opposite of the do's. Don't rush the breathing. So the timing matters. So especially when it's choppy, you really want to make sure that, for example, if the current is coming at you from one direction, you really want to be able to breathe in the other direction so that you're actually able to get a good breath. Versus if you only can breathe to one side and the current is and the water is coming onto that side, you're going to have a lot harder of a time as you swim. So onto some open water skills, especially if you've never done a triathlon before, even if you have and it's the first triathlon of the season. Grab some friends, make some friends. The triathlon community is very welcoming, so reach out to your local triathlon club, and they likely have some open water swim sessions that they potentially have some prospective members join, and practice some open water starts. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable with people around you when you're swimming in open water and not just when you have, tons of space. You don't need to, make it really intense and have like a ton of people necessarily, but even 2 to 3 people and just all running out and kind of practicing what that feels like to just jump right in is something that I really recommend. And doing it sometimes, we'll talk about kind of like warming up for swims and that sort of thing later, but especially if it's sort of good conditions and it's warm outside and you're relatively warm, doing that first thing before you've even like gotten in the water previously, I think that helps mimic a lot of the sort of fear sometimes that happens for people who are not as comfortable in the water is sort of like that initial shock when you haven't, maybe there's a race that you don't get a chance to warm up in the water prior for whatever reason. And so it's really good to just kind of mimic that same sort of feeling so that come race day, it's a feeling that you're familiar with and you've, practiced sort of either learning how to relax or how to calm yourself down as you do that. Do you sight every 5 to 10 strokes? That's going to be really dependent on how how good you are at navigating the conditions around you, the people around you. If you're someone who notices that, you're trying to swim straight and you're going way off course, then you might be someone who needs to potentially work on balancing out kind of what's happening. Are you crossing over on one side? That would be something to work on in the pool. That would give you some more feedback. But also, you might want to sight more than every 5 to 10 strokes. You might be sighting every 3 strokes, for example. That's going to just depend on who the swimmer is. As I said, just simulating race conditions. Weekly is ideal, I would say, when, the summer gets nice and we're, outside, just because even in a 50-meter pool, it's going to feel different swimming in open water because of the sighting, because of the different water conditions, because of the continuous nature of having no walls. But making sure that you're practicing in a wetsuit, if it's going to be a wetsuit that you're wearing for your swim, in similar conditions, if safe to do so, that will be really helpful come race day. You'll just feel much more prepared as a result of that. Safety first when it comes to swimming as well. Find a buddy or a coach or a friend. Also having a buoy just one of those kind of toe floats that you wear as you're swimming, is really important. Even if, you're young and you're healthy and you're like, why would I bring a float with me? You never know. You can cramp really easily sometimes when you're swimming, especially if you've, biked or ran or, done something harder beforehand. But that's something where, in open water and you're way out, no one's going to be able to help you there. So having that floaty could be a life-saving situation. Wearing your wetsuit in practice. So, wetsuit is something that you're only going to get a feel for while you're swimming in it, and you're only going to get a feel for if it's too tight in your shoulders after you've done a bit of swimming in it. Sometimes wetsuits take a little bit of time to stretch out, so you'll get kind of a better idea of that as you go. But making sure that you're testing the fit, the comfort, and the feel before race day is absolutely imperative. Smart swimmers are going to adapt. So adjusting for waves, for currents, visibility, just really making sure that you're prepared for, any of those type of different open water situations. Don't don't panic in waves. When you're swimming with waves, you want to make sure that you're sighting. If you're going sort of up and down, you want to make sure that you're sighting at the top of that wave. That's going to give you the best view going forward. And again, that takes practice to learn. When you feel yourself going down and then rising up, that's when you pop up and you look up and you sight. So that would definitely be something to practice. We talked about not zigzagging, making sure that you're practicing in open water. Don't, swim alone. This one's kind of a joke one, but don't swim straight into buoys accidentally. We want to swim around the buoys in races. It's not uncommon for people to, have some contact in the swim. So we just want to avoid unnecessary contact, like into hard plastic buoys. And yeah, not experimenting with new wetsuits on race day. So again, making sure safety and prep that you're swimming with a buddy, a coach, having someone with you can save your life. Check the water conditions, check the weather. If there's any chance of thunderstorm, like that's probably not a good time to be going out for a swim. If there's any lightning, obviously, checking water temperature this time of year can be really important just to make sure that it's something that you're comfortable with. Cold water shock is also a real thing too. So making sure that you're comfortable with the temperature or staying closer to shore if it is kind of colder water conditions. This also plays into making sure that you warm up before every session. And this is something where you can get away with sort of not warming up as much when you're younger, but as you get older, it's really good to either do some band work beforehand, even just jogging in place if it's kind of a cold day out, just doing something to get your blood flow moving so it's not, again, such a shock when you get into the water. So yeah, don't swim alone in open water. Do not recommend that. Don't ignore safety. Always respect, what the lifeguards are telling you, what the water safety officials are telling you, what your race director is telling you, especially if you're not allowed to swim in the water before a race. And then don't skip the warm up before the swim. So, cold muscles, cold water, higher risk of cramping, shock. We do not want any of that. So here we'll talk a little bit about some sort of general drills and progressions, do's and don'ts. So we want to work on sort of three different parts, or there's many more things that we can work on, but these are going to be the basic ones to start out with. So catch, pull, and rotation. So catch meaning when your hand enters the water, what's happening at that first part? Are you able to catch the water at the top of that, after the entry and at the top of that stroke? Pull meaning when you are reaching back and pulling the water or sort of pushing yourself forward, however you might think about it. And then again, rotation. So are your shoulders and your hips rotating? Are they rotating together? Are they rotating with good timing? Drills will really help you build awareness around that versus just swimming alone. So, the people who grew up swimming, they do a lot of these drills as kids, and these drills are just as good for adults who did not grow up swimming to be doing as well. Do gradually build distance and intensity. So progressive overload is going to prevent injury. It's going to build endurance. It's going to build your confidence in the water as well. So if you start, with let's say like a 3,000 yard set and you've only ever swam 500 yards ever before, and you just feel, that you never can get there, like that's not going to be very encouraging for going into your next swim. So making sure that you are setting realistic expectations for yourself as you are starting your swim journey, or even as you are building to maybe a new race distance as well. And then combining drills with main sets. So just doing all drills is not going to help you in the sense that we want to use those drills to then carry over into our sort of regular stroke in that main set. And we don't want to ignore technique, obviously, when we're fatigued, getting into the don'ts, just because that's going to be when, the bad habits are reinforced. However, we want to make sure that we are starting with the drills at the very least, and then trying to keep those good technique habits into the main set. And yeah, so the don'ts, don't neglect progression, don't skip swim drills. And hopefully if you take away one thing from the swim section here, it's, safety and do some more drills. All right, so on to the bike. Do's and don'ts. So getting a professional bike fit can be life-changing. If you are someone who is uncomfortable on the bike, it can change everything around that. It can make biking more enjoyable. It can make you, not have injuries as you're biking. It can make it safer because your bike handles better. So all I will say about that is do get a professional bike fit. Ask your friends who their local bike fitter is, look it up. But there's many bike fitters that are wonderful in the area, on the Cape and sort of closer to Boston too. So if you are not sure who to go to, I'm also happy to give you just recommendations for your area as well. But yes, this comes also to checking your saddle and stem regularly. So making sure that, your saddle hasn't slipped down and you're stomping really low on the pedals. That's a good recipe for a knee injury. Making sure that you're engaging your core while riding. So all that means is that you want your pelvis to be sort of in a more neutral position. I see a lot of people sort of like tucked under and pushed back. And that's when you see that people are sort of pushing away and into the handlebars. And that means that they're not really engaging their core and their hips properly as they're riding. And that plays into, maintaining a neutral spine posture as well with that. Mixing indoor and outdoor rides is really important. Outdoor rides help you build handling skills, which we will talk about later, but also just it's a different type of stimulus for your leg muscles. It's going to be different just because of the gradient change. It's going to be different because of wind. And so if you only are used to riding indoors, let's say at like a constant speed, it's going to be quite a shock and very energy draining when you go outside and try to ride. So the don'ts are basically, I would say, the the opposite of this. So for time's sake, I think I will move on to the next one. Actually, except to say that just don't ride excessively fatigued, meaning if it is something where you're doing like an all-out test, for example, I have most of my people do that. Most of the athletes that I coach do that indoors, just from a safety perspective in our area, in sort of closer to the city in Boston. There's just not great places to do that sort of testing. So from a safety perspective, if you are going to be doing a super hard ride, that might be one that you want to do indoors on a trainer, just from a safety perspective. So pedaling and cadence in general, and this is again going to be a little bit dependent on the person. Some people can maintain above 90 RPMs, revolutions per minute during training or racing. But for the most part, everyone should try to maintain around that 80 to 90 RPMs. And that's mainly because that will help you run off the bike a little bit better than if you were down at 60 or 70 RPMs and really stomping. So it'll help save your legs muscularly if you're at that RPM. So practicing that will help you when it comes to, race day and you're trying to maintain the same RPMs there. You do want to practice higher cadence for times, for short times, and that's mainly to teach your body, like neuromuscularly, meaning the connection between your brain and your muscles, what it feels like to pedal faster. And that will help you because it will also give the impression to your brain that pedaling at 80 or 80 to 90 RPMs almost feels slow. So it's kind of a way to trick yourself into being able to keep those 80 to 90 RPMs. We do want to focus on a smooth pedal stroke, so being efficient, pushing over the top, and sort of pulling around the back of the pedal stroke. Practicing varying cadence and training that will help you again if you're riding mainly inside, let's say over the winter, and then you go outside and you encounter hills and different things that will require you to, either be at lower RPMs if you're climbing or, higher if you're maybe going downhill or on flats. And that's something where tracking cadence and heart rate when possible is great. It's just a very easy metric to elevate your cycling. You don't necessarily need a power meter, but those two things I would say are quite helpful when it comes to trying to, do a little bit more, push yourself a little bit more when it comes to cycling. And then also, on the cadence side, like I said, making sure that from an injury perspective, you're not just stomping on the pedals and then trying to, go run or even just cycling at a low cadence in general. Heart rate will tell you, what type of zone you're training in compared to your relative effort. So it gives you kind of a nice data point, at least there. And the don'ts are basically the opposite of the do's. So nutrition and hydration, this is something where I am not a nutritionist. I do not pretend to be. So for people who have, more in-depth, I would say nutritional questions or, want to lose weight along with sort of other training goals, that would be something where I would really encourage you to reach out to a nutritionist or a dietitian, someone that can help you kind of from a more day-to-day meal planning type of perspective. But from a race perspective, you do really want to practice your race nutrition during training. So that will help you avoid gut distress. It will help you not bonk during your rides. It will help you feel stronger. It will help you get more out of your training. And that goes along with carrying water and electrolytes. It gets really hot here in the summer. And if you're sort of a saltier sweater or you just tend to sweat a bit more, making sure that you have salt tabs with you while you're training, or electrolytes in some other form, just that will make it a much more pleasant experience because then you'll be less likely to cramp, either as you're riding or during a race when you're getting off to run too. Tracking calories and fuel intake for long rides, and that's mainly to make sure that you are eating enough. I rarely see that people are overeating on a ride. Usually it's going to be underfueling that will be sort of the limiter in terms of recovery on the backside of a ride, or limiting within a ride too, and you really kind of fade in that last half or so of it. So making sure that you're looking at, how many grams of carbs per hour that you're taking in and adjusting that individually depending on the person. The trend right now that we've seen is that higher is better, but that really is going to depend. Can you actually oxidize and utilize the carbohydrates that you are taking in without having GI distress with that too? And most importantly, do not try new nutrition on race day. Don't want to be on the receiving end of that. So for bricks and transitions, I would say weekly brick sessions, specifically bike to run. That's something that as you get closer to your A race or your first race of the season, you want to make sure that you're incorporating these. Over the winter, they're likely not quite as important, in my opinion, just because we're not as specific in terms of getting into kind of what race day is going to look like. There might be other things that we want to work on, but especially as we're getting closer to race day, we really want to make sure that it's something that we're practicing. Doing transitions also along with that, really important, just so you get a feel for kind of what that looks like come race day. And also running fast off the bike too. Really feeling what it's like for your heart rate and your legs and everything to feel different as you move from bike to run. But you want to make sure that you do that gradually. You want to make sure that you're running off the bike at an appropriate distance for the race that you're doing. And then same thing as previous in terms of the nutrition. Do incorporate your race day nutrition into your brick workout. So that might include practicing taking a gel or something while you're running in addition to the bike nutrition too. So safety, do wear a helmet at all times. I wish that I didn't have to say this, but it's not always obvious to everyone. Just because I would include, commuting in this as well. If you are someone who bikes and commutes, or even just bikes for fun, but making sure that you're wearing a helmet. Again, it is a life-saving thing. Most people should be replacing their helmets. The recommendation is it's a little bit mixed, but around if your helmet's 5 years old or has just a lot of use. If you've ever been in a crash, definitely. But always making sure that you're wearing a helmet while you're riding. And, along with that, your bike is only as safe as you maintain it to be. So if your brakes are worn down, if your tire has old sealant in it, and you have, a sudden pop or a leak, like that is going to make cycling very unsafe. You want to make sure that, everything is screwed in properly and your derailleur doesn't suddenly fall off because it's missing a screw. All these things that can potentially happen if you're not maintaining your bike. That would be something where if you don't know how to do that, I would recommend bringing, your bike into your local bike shop. And oftentimes they're very happy to show you, like, this is a basic, safety check. These are the things that I'm looking for before I go out and ride. So always making sure that you're taking that into account before you hit the road is really, really important. Practicing road awareness. We want to make drivers on the road like us more as cyclists and not honk at us and be like, oh, those cyclists. Like, we really want to obey, the road rules. We want to make sure that we're very visible, we're very predictable, we're not swerving. If you see that it's a road with a lot of potholes, for example, don't ride on the right side of the road where most of the potholes are likely to be. Go actually take up more of the middle of the road so that you're not swerving around on the side of the road and you're being, very your actions are expected. That's probably the biggest thing is you just want to make sure that the cars behind you or to the side of you know exactly what you're doing. And a lot of that is hand signals, being comfortable taking off one hand off of your bars, for example. Very important skill to practice before you get on the road. Making sure that you're riding in visible clothing. In Massachusetts, if you're riding 30 minutes before sunrise or 30 minutes afterwards, you must have a front and rear light. So that is a Massachusetts law. I would recommend, in general, it's great to have some bike lights on. And just again, the more visible, the better. So this comes to skills in terms of being able to take your hand off to be able to signal. Um, so practicing hill climbing and descents, those are going to feel different than flats. Incorporating bike skill sessions, if that's in a parking lot, if it's on a very quiet hill, those are all going to be important things to make sure that you're safe riding outside. And, also schedule recovery rides too. So not every ride needs to be sort of hammered. You don't need to be going all out for every ride, but making sure that you're scheduling some recovery rides in there as well. So on to the run. So, for pacing, we really do want to typically, if it's just sort of a regular brick run, we want to make sure that we're starting slow and we're gradually increasing our pace just because we know that, our heart rate is going to likely spike as we do that. Obviously, it's different if you're training for maybe a sprint event and you're practicing something a bit faster off the bike. That would be a different sort of use case there. And that comes into, doing the weekly brick runs in general, monitoring your heart rate. Again, that can just be helpful for seeing where you're at in terms of a pacing or feedback mechanism there. You do want to practice sort of negative splits too. So that's where you'd start out slower and then see if you can get faster. That'll also tell you sort of how hard potentially that bike ride was beforehand, just to see if you have anything left in the tank to be able to go a bit faster. And then you do also want to practice, like I said, running faster straight off the bike. And I think visualization and being mentally prepared is just as important as physical. So, thinking about how it feels when you're fatigued and what that's going to feel like on race day, but having, either the finish line in mind, having, one of your good friends or family cheering you on, thinking about that, thinking about all the things that will help you, get through some of those harder runs. Form and technique. So this will again depend a little bit on the person, but keeping cadence between 170 and 180, making sure that your foot is landing underneath you and not ahead of you and you're overstriding. Making sure that you're maintaining upright posture as you're running, keeping your arms sort of efficient versus swinging really wide, practicing. And again, this might depend a little bit on the person, but typically a midfoot landing is going to be most efficient for people versus a forefoot or a heel strike type of landing. I could do a whole talk on that in and of itself, so I'll just sort of leave that where it is. We do want to include some form drills, so similar to how we do high cadence work or just skill work on the bike. This is sort of the run, version of that where we're just working on neuromuscular activation and just trying to prime the system and get it ready to be able to use that sort of newfound either range of motion or awareness around what's happening at your legs for that and the rest of your body too. Video form can potentially be helpful. That really just depends on the person as well, but that's something where I'd probably not do that like with the swim you can sort of get an idea of maybe where your hand is entering and oftentimes with the swim what you think you're doing is very different than video, but with run it's a little bit different in that I would definitely not change anything necessarily with your running right off the bat. I would really seek either a physical therapist or a run coach or someone who has a little bit more knowledge before trying to tweak anything with your running specifically. So, strength and injury prevention, again, a talk I could do an entire talk just on this slide. But I really recommend, as a physical therapist, that people are doing 2 to 3 strength sessions per week. Now, I don't want that to seem intimidating because it can be a 10-minute strength session. Like it does not need to be 45 minutes to an hour, 2 to 3 times a week on top of, swim, bike, and run. But just making sure that you are doing exercises that are either supporting imbalances or weaknesses that you personally have, or again, we spend a lot of time in sort of a straightforward plane in cycling and running specifically. Swimming, you get a little bit more rotation, but there's no impact element of that, and there's no gravity element of that. But making sure that you're doing things that sort of get you out of the position that you are used to being in, mainly like sort of hip extension type positions. So you're not always working your hip flexors just as you always are, with the bike and the run, which is also kind of why the swim is nice too, because you are moving in more of a hip extended type of position, but not against gravity. So making sure that you're adding glute, hip, core exercises, doing single leg exercises, not only single leg exercises though, because we want to make sure that we're lifting heavy enough double leg in order to, help with either bone density or just overall muscular strength too. Foam rolling and stretching after long runs specifically can be really helpful for people. And also, the biggest area that I see for injury wise, oftentimes in triathlon, will be ankle and foot, just because there's a lot of stress that goes through that area with particularly the bike going into the run. And so, making sure you're doing specific strengthening drills for that. So, endurance and training overall, I think the 10% rule is potentially a little bit outdated, but it's an easy metric to be able to increase your weekly mileage. So, making sure that you are not going more than 10% week over week when it comes to incorporating your running, incorporating longer runs to help build your fatigue resistance and your endurance. Very helpful. And then making sure that you're including a recovery week too, and mixing up the surfaces that you are running on. Nutrition, so this is more about sort of how to eat afterwards or before, making sure that you're not starting on zero fuel, having a small snack pre-run if needed, making sure that you're hydrating on your longer runs, making sure that you're refueling properly. And I probably haven't said this enough, but making sure that you're sleeping enough on not on rest days, but really every day too. That is the best way to recover is just pure sleep. So transitions. Make sure that you're laying out your gear in order of use. Again, this comes to practicing during your brick workouts, both swim to bike and bike to run. Have it as simple as possible. So don't have a bunch of different options. Make sure that your things are where they need to be and they're always in that place. And you'll know then exactly what you need to grab and in what order to. Making sure that you've practiced mounting your bike. Oftentimes you can feel a little wobbly after the swim, a little more tired than usual, but learning or practicing what that feels like to mount your bike after that sort of effort is really important. And then you won't become, I feel like there was a meme or something recently of just people falling as they were trying to get on the bike in T1. And so just don't become that person. And yeah, like I said, keeping transition minimal, organized, marking it with familiar cues. Depending on the race, you might be able to, have like a bright towel on the floor or just something so you know exactly where your setup is. And then making sure that you are checking your timing chip, your watch, all of the things that we need for race day. So do practice your transitions weekly. Do simulate bike to run and swim to bike, or swim to bike, bike to run. Do rehearse wetsuit removal. Really important, especially if there's no one at the race to remove the wetsuit. It's very different to take off a wetsuit when it is wet and you are tired than it is to do it when you are completely dry. Do practice which way you're going to mount your or re-rack your bike. Do practice mounting and dismounting. And you can time that to see if you've had improvement. That's something where, as you get more advanced in the sport, there's many ways to improve time, and transition is actually a really easy way to pick up, even a minute or two off of your total race time. So mental prep, mentioned this a little bit earlier, but Everything that you do in a triathlon should be broken up into, I would say, each leg, but you want to be pre-visualizing each one before it happens. So at the end of your swim, you're thinking, where do I run? What do I do next? When you're running through T1, what am I going to be taking off? What am I going to be, putting on? Really visualizing exact order, sort of slightly ahead of time, will help you execute on race day a lot better. And even doing this in training, more importantly, too, will help you, again, make that very repeatable and smooth. If you need to have a mantra for focus, come up with one. Focus, flow, fast, smooth, whatever it is. Yes, 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 I can do this. Think of something that will encourage you and to help you focus potentially, but also just, in general, having a solution and having sort of an outlet for negative thoughts that will inevitably come into play. And what do you do about them? How do you turn them around into something that's productive and positive instead? Do stay calm. Even the pros fall off their bikes mounting in T1. There's sort of, again, funny video stuff out there if you need a laugh of sort of triathlon snafus. It's kind of what makes our sport interesting at times, is what happens during the transition. But just stay calm, laugh it off, fix it, continue. Just always make sure that your helmet is buckled before you unrack your bike and it stays buckled. And yeah, you can recover quickly from minor errors. But if you're forgetting your helmet, then that is not something that can be recovered from quite as easily. Gear, so testing all your gear in training, making sure that it's something that you're comfortable with. Ideally, you have your gear well ahead of time. You've tested it out. It's not something where you're panic ordering a wetsuit a week before the race because you see that the water temperature is too cold. Making sure that your chip is where it needs to be, your bib placement for the run is ready to go. You've practiced your nutrition, you've practiced your transitions, and making sure that you're learning from those transitions as well. So recovery between legs. If you are newer to the sport and you feel a little bit panicked, just take 5 to 10 deep breaths just to reset, grab a sip of water, then continue on your way. No harm in doing that. If anything, then potentially next time you'll be able to eliminate that and that'll, save you that minute or so. Um, and then, focus on the next leg. Don't think about past mistakes. Don't be upset that you haven't had your best swim. And, try to compensate with that on the bike and end up over biking. Focus on, your game plan and really stick to it as you go. So race day prep. Just going to go through this a little quickly just because of time purposes. So do make sure that you're tapering beforehand, meaning reducing your volume. You do want to make sure that your intensity is staying sharp. You're staying sharp because your intensity is still staying the same, but you'll just do a little bit less. You have a little more free time to, hey, what about sleeping? And then, look at your training logs, really keep track of that. It's going to help you become a better athlete so that you can either repeat what you've done that's worked well in the past, or you can, try something new that you think might work for this time. And then, yeah, visualizing race pace and strategy, prioritizing rest and sleep too. Do have everything ready the night before, lay out everything so it's ready to go. Have backups of things, even if it's not you that ends up forgetting something, but a friend or someone that you want to help on race day morning. There's always someone who forgets their goggles or their strap breaks or something. So be the person that has an extra pair to lend out and you will make someone's day. Do double check, all of the bike things that we talked about before, have backup nutrition, check the weather, but don't panic about the weather. The weather is out of your control. So just try to think about your training and preparation. Hopefully you've practiced in, mal weather beforehand too. And so you're ready to go. Mindset, we talked about this beforehand, so I'm going to leave this slide here and we'll move on to the next one. Logistics and race day prep. There's nothing worse than arriving too late and being rushed to set up your transition. So, I like my sleep as much as anyone else. Do I love waking up at, 4 a.m. on race day? No, but it's race day and race day is special. So if it's race day, suck it up, wake up a little earlier. If you're there with a little bit of extra time, that's great. It'll give you more time to take in your surroundings, chat to some people, make a new friend, talk about, what's going to happen on race day. It's all part of the experience. So get there early, do a little warm up if that's something that you've practiced in training. If you have not, then maybe don't, because again, nothing new on race day. But do make sure that everything is organized and ready to go for transition. And ideally, you have already reviewed the course map, your plan. You know exactly what you're doing going in, but you also have a plan B and C and D, and you're flexible. So when it comes to race plan and pacing, exactly like I said, making sure that you have something in place, making sure that you're remembering to take in fluids and fuel at aid stations, staying calm if errors happen. They happen to everyone, but it's all about how you react and respond to those errors and move on from there. It's nice if you can cool down after finishing, if you can hop back in the water, depending on how long of a race it is, if you can walk a little bit or stretch, just do something to aid your recovery for the next day. And most importantly, getting calories in afterwards too. And that is it. So thank you everyone for listening and for being here. I will take any questions now, Kathleen. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
There you go.
You have 8 minutes left. So everyone that's on, Emma has a hard stop at like 7:59. So that's why about 10 slides in or 10 slides to go, she's like, oh no, quick, I gotta get through this. So she wanted to leave room for questions, but Emma, I put in the chat, if anyone has
Oh.
questions, rather than Emma trying to like quickly answer a question, send her an email. Check in chat. Her email's there. She's got the QR code here for a 15
Mhm.
minute free consultation. You can't beat that. Emma, this was fantastic. I really appreciate all of your time today and putting together these slides. If the slides are something that you're willing to share with people, then
Absolutely.
wonderful. Then anyone wants Emma's slides, just email her and she'll send you, and she can send that to you. Email me if you forget Emma's email. You can put something through our knee website and we can get that to you because it's such valuable information. And we so appreciate you being on today. Thanks, Emma. Um,
Thank you.
if it hopefully we've got a few folks here that are going to do our Wellfleet Sprint Triathlon, which is our first race of the season. It is sold out, so if you're not signed up, I'm sorry. But Hyannis is the following weekend, plenty of room there. And hopefully we'll see some of Emma's folks, the MIT and BU there as well as, of course, other clubs. Um, thank you again, Emma, for being on. We're going to give you a few minutes so you can actually get a drink of water and maybe even go to the bathroom and get a snack before you
Thank
have to
you.
go on. So yeah, so thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you all for being on. Remember, we're putting this on YouTube, and our New England Endurance Events channel. And there'll be a link to it on that Tri Talks page on our website as well. So I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and looking forward to seeing you at race season.